All right, good morning, everyone. How are you doing? It's a great keynote, wasn't it? I mean, exciting. All the new features, Silverlight 4. Scott spent about 30 minutes talking about all the progress we've made since Silverlight 3, which was ages ago in July of last year, right? I was really blown away by the keynote. How many people are planning to start building sort of Windows Phone 7 series apps soon? How many have already started building their first app? I hate you. I hate you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. My code geeks, rock on. My name is Keith Smith. I'm a group program manager on the Silverlight runtime team. What that means, surprisingly, is I manage a group of program managers who are responsible for a set of features ranging from the application model, text, HTML hosting, networking, the SDK, the toolkit, accessibility, localization, a lot of different things. So I'm happy to be with you here today to talk about Silverlight 4. Welcome to CL07. Hopefully you're in the right place. This topic is going to give you, hopefully, a good idea of all the work the team has been up to and all the things we've done over the past few months since the PDC with a focus on the RC. So Joe spent a lot of time doing a keynote plugging his kid, Alexander. I don't know if you were paying attention to that. My wife and I have an 11-month-old. I left them both for the first time to come here to MIX, so I figured I would give them a plug as well. This is my son, Owen. And my wife told me as soon as I get back home that she's handing them over and disappearing. So hopefully we all get the benefit of that investment of time. So the agenda that we have today is pretty straightforward for an overview session. I wanted to, actually let me first start. Who all went to PDC 2009 back in November? Show of hands. Okay, fair number of you. Fair number of you. And those who raised their hands, who attended Karen Corby's, my colleague session, was an overview for the beta. Or watched the video online, microsoftpdc.com. All right, excellent, excellent. So it's not too many of you. That's fantastic because for this session, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus mostly on the new features that are in the RC. We will cover and sort of recap some of the features in the SDK, but Silverlight 4 is so massive, we only have 60 minutes together today. So in order to get through that, I will have to focus most of my attention on the latest changes. I highly encourage you to go to microsoftpdc.com, watch Karen's fantastic video where she shows some amazing demos of the SDK features, the beta features, and we'll focus on the RC. The goal, again, is for you to leave here with a broad understanding of what Silverlight 4 is. And I think to accomplish that, it's helpful to take a sort of brief step back and go back in time and look at where we were and how that influenced where we are today. So I will give you a brief history of Silverlight and previous versions. Then we're going to jump right into what's in store with the current release, Silverlight 4. And then I want to spend some time talking about sort of further information that I think will help you as you decide how to spend your time over the next few days while here at MIX, and hopefully once you return to your home or your place of work. Second to last, we'll end with a call to action, things that I'm asking you to do to help us. And then finally, we'll open it up for a general Q&A. Sound good? All right. So a brief history of Silverlight. Dave Wolf from Synergy in the keynote talked about his first reaction when he saw Silverlight 1.0 back in 2007, MIX 2007. And that's when we released Silverlight 1.0 beta and the 1.1 alpha. How many people went to the very first MIX conference in 2006? Show of hands, show of hands. Okay. Well, anybody remember what the technology were that we featured in 2006, the three sort of big pillars for that conference? IE was one, IE7, ASP.NET Ajax was number 2, and surprisingly, Windows Media Center was number 3. And from that time, from 2006 until 2007, we actually did all the work to release a lot of what you saw in Silverlight 1.0. And surprisingly, a lot of what Silverlight 1.0, a lot of the scenarios that it's meant to address were covered. i.e. better browsing experiences, Windows Media Center bringing your video to other screens, and as well as certainly ASP.NET Ajax. Again, raising the floor of what's possible in browsers and making it easy for people to build sort of the web 2.0 or 3.0 sites. So basically, since 2007, about every 6 months, there's been a major public release of Silverlight. I think that's an amazing cadence. It's easy to ship rapidly if you don't take many chances. It's easy to ship rapidly if you aren't making big bets. And Silverlight certainly has taken big bets and has certainly been an area where we've been doing constant innovation and making one version significantly better than the next version. So I think for the people, the engineers that I represent back in Redmond, I think kudos to those guys, to the engineers, the writers, the designers, all the business professionals who have been on this breakneck pace with Silverlight. We do it for you. We're essential to Silverlight, but we're not sufficient for Silverlight to be successful. We saw Synergy, we saw Vertigo, we saw all, CTV and NBC Olympics. It's you who are actually working with Silverlight each day that are essential to its success. Scott talked about going from 45% to 60% worldwide deployments. Yeah, we can build a better mousetrap, but unless you're building the experiences on top of that mousetrap, that number won't continue to go up. So, thank you on behalf of the product team. So real quickly, I want to sort of talk about the versions of Silverlight and by the numbers. So 1.0 really was Silverlight getting into the RIA space. We started talking about things like cross-browser, cross-platform. One of the key features of 1.0, if you believe it or not, was the auto-updater. That way, it allowed us to release these new versions and have machines seamlessly move forward without having to go through a bunch of heavy lifting through sort of Microsoft Update or Windows Update, or how to service the release on the Mac. We also ushered in, I think, the new era of high-quality audio and video. Windows Media Player was Microsoft's solution in that point of time, and we struggled with sort of cross-platform. A lot of the content publishers and broadcasters needed a solution for delivering their content to multiple platforms in a secure way, and Silverlight 1.0 was our answer to that problem. Silverlight 2, we actually did the work to bring in the CLR, increase performance, so sort of establishing the same semantics or characteristics of desktop applications, but running within the browser. The focus in Silverlight 2 was also on role-based tools. We saw a lot of good things about Blend 4 today and Visual Studio 2010. And with Silverlight 2, we really wanted to make sure our designers and our developers were using the tools that were customized to how they work and allowed them to work more efficiently together. With Silverlight 3, which was released back in July of last year, we heard from our customers they wanted a way to, again, sort of erase those boundaries between the browser and native applications running on the machine. So we had the out-of-browser feature, which allows you to break out of the sandbox and create an experience that seemed to be more integrated with the target operating system. GPU acceleration, so performance has always been a key area that we want to continue to push the envelope on. So making applications more performant, empowering more scenarios in terms of data visualization and working with huge data sets was one of the goals of that feature. And with the Silverlight toolkit, we actually took a different angle where we say, okay, we have some ideas. We want you, the community, the ecosystem, to help us prioritize what things are important to you and how are we doing in terms of implementation. Are these controls you're interested in? Are these utilities or unit testing frameworks that can help you? And we would iterate on those in a very public manner with shared source, and we shipped the full version of the toolkit in the same time frame as Silverlight 3. So I think that was a big step forward for Silverlight. So here we are with Silverlight 4. And again, Silverlight 4 is that major leap forward. What are the types of applications developers want to build? What are the types of experiences that content owners are trying to enable? How can we make it easier to integrate with the tooling and to use the workflows that designers and developers have established over many, many years of doing either AJAX development or desktop development or more recently phone development? So one of those areas is around, again, us getting out of the developer's way and giving them access to more of the iron in the operating system via elevated trusts. So what things can you do through automation, say a WPF application or a WinForms application on Windows, and aspirationally with AppleScript on the Mac, and how do we start enabling some of those types of scenarios? Printing any line of business application, any enterprise application worth its salt, needs a way to get its content to a printer in most cases. If it's doing things with data, if it's displaying data or asking the user to do a lot of data entry, chances are those users want to share that data. And today, a lot of times that means printing. So we did add printing support in Silverlight 4. And then text. Rich text support is something every application had. Since the teletype monitors, text has been a central component of any application. And we wanted to, again, raise the ceiling and the floor of what's possible with text in Silverlight. So I want to quickly do an apology, especially for those in the back or who may strain their eyes with this next slide. Forgive me. This is a quick summary of all the features that were in the beta. I wanted to throw this up, and I don't expect you to be able to read it in the back. We're not going to walk through this slide, certainly. I already talked about some of the support in terms of elevated privileges and printing and rich text that they debuted in the beta. And I think it's worth noting that we made a lot of progress between July and November. That's 4 months. And this is the feature set that we were able to ship, high quality, beta release of Silverlight 4, and here we are about 4 months later talking about the RC. So let's go ahead. What's in the RC? So I talked about text and the importance it has played in computer applications since the very early days. In the beta, some of the things that we talked about were the introduction of the rich text control, basically a new component for allowing you to use XAML, the rich representation format of XAML, and create formatted text to interact with it, to do things like implement a word processor or an email editor if those scenarios were important to you. For the RC, we wanted to focus on rounding out that feature set, listening to the feedback. Like a lot of people were confused about the name of the rich text area control. So one of the things that we did was we named it to rich text box to be consistent with WPF. So that's happened in the RC. Some people were talking about the importance of accessibility and using screen readers, and certainly a lot of jurisdictions require automation support and screen reader support, and so we closed that hole in our rich text control for RC. But more importantly, we looked at ways that we could make our text support more, say, international, more globally aware. Things like right to left, things like Arabic and Hebrew and Thai and Vietnamese support. So we had the Arabic and Hebrew in the beta for RC. We added Thai, Vietnamese, and Indic input support, and I'll show those in the demo. So for rich text, the takeaway is we have rounded out the feature. We have set ourselves up to have more WPF compat scenarios going forward. We expect most of the primary use case for rich text control today is for reading, for allowing customers to read rich information that they generally would rely on HTML in the browser. And since our web browser control does not work in the browser, you need a way of displaying rich text in the sandbox, in the browser, or out of the browser in full trust. And the rich text control certainly allows you to do that. So let's look at a demo. So I'll first go ahead and just run the demo so we get a feel for what we're doing here. And I have a text editor that implements a bunch of different features, basically a scaled down word processor, if you will, classic case of needing rich text. Some of the features that Karen demoed at the PDC were around the mouse wheel support and right-click support. So there's copy and paste on the right-click menu. There's a menu. I guess I need to. There's mouse wheel support. You can't see me rolling my mouse here, but there is mouse wheel support built in. And there's clipboard support for copying rich content to the clipboard. And we have a XAML property in the RC that allows you to get at the content, the underlying representation of this rich text box. So if I click this XAML control, or XAML button, excuse me, you'll see that this is a pretty straightforward, if you're familiar with WPF and its support for rich text, pretty straightforward representation, verbose, because we tend to be verbose because we want correctness. We'll always maximize correctness over efficiency when we have to make that trade-off, especially when it comes to data loss scenarios. I know some of you have probably used HTML editors in the past that didn't do a good job of being both a reader and an editor for HTML because they struggled with maintaining the fidelity when they switched those modes. So for our rich text control, that's not an option. We want to make sure it's consistent, that your content is persisted across mode switches, whether you're displaying the content or you're editing the content. One of the cool features of the rich text box control is your ability to insert other UI elements using the inline UI container control. So here we have a data grid, and I can easily add a chart, or excuse me, a calendar. Now right now, since we're in edit mode, these controls are disabled. If I switch over to read mode, then you have interactive controls. You can sort the grid, sort by last name or first name. So some interesting scenarios there where for your end user, you can present a UI where they can have a chart, or they could type in content and do data entry, and then quickly either export this into a database, or if it's a form scenario, or they could print it out, say for a tax preparation scenario or something like that. So one of the other features I talked about was the clipboard support, and hooked up these buttons to basically allow you to do a selection. We'll talk about the selection API here shortly. And you see the typical prompt whenever you're getting content from the user. We require user-initiated action. We prompt the user to get their permission to give you access to their clipboard. I'll go ahead and say yes, and then let's go into Notepad. And we can paste it and see similar representation. Now you notice that I had a partial selection. I didn't select all the text from the beginning or clear through to the end, but we had to provide well-formed XML. Here again is we're doing work behind the scenes to ensure that when you paste this content back, it is correct, it's well-formed, it'll actually render in the rich text box and not break the user's intent. So we won't save that. Let me go and go into Visual Studio now. Back to Visual Studio. Got to get out full screen here. One of the things I wanted to show was the ability to use the spring loading on format. That was one of the items that was on the slide. And what that is, let me again just show you how the application behaves as it's written. If I want to boldface text in a modern word processor, you can hit the boldface button or type Control B, and that setting is persistent, it's static until you get out of that mode, until you exit that mode by again hitting Control B or clicking on the button. So I'll start typing and I'll hit the B button to do bold, but you see it didn't stick. In order to bold here, I have to do a selection, and the bold works. So what I want to do is write the code, show you how easy it is to actually get that sticky sort of spring-loaded formatting inside this control. So here's our method, that's our event handler that's hooked up to that button. And currently, if you notice, we're doing a check to see if there's a selection, meaning that the length of the selection is greater than 0. Now, that obviously prevents us from doing a spring load because the selection is not, there's no selection when you just have the caret before or after a character. So by fixing this bug, if you will, where geez, that wasn't good. I think I hit the N key. There we go. Where we were unnecessarily checking the selection. The basics. All right. We can go ahead and rerun this application, and again, by just not checking the range unless that's what you intend. If we click B now and type, and then click B again and type, it'd see that it actually is spring loaded. So the selection APIs, the ability to know where the caret is placed is one of the cool features that we've added in the RC. I don't know if you've been paying attention as I moused around. There's this pointer cursor, this hand cursor that's tracking around. This is again part of our selection APIs and being able to know where the position of the caret is. If I hit Control and start moving the pointer around, you see I can go by character. So this is one of the event handlers where I can get very granular information on where the caret is placed, where it's hovering over, and then update the location of that cursor, that custom icon, if you will, for things like spell check scenarios, drawing squiggles or what have you, or even for displaying the right-click menu. The other thing I want to show is how we can go ahead and do some highlighting, some using the selection APIs to do some basic highlighting. So here we have this notion of a text pointer, and we can ask the rich text box where in its content the caret is, and start that as our selection point, and then do some interesting comparisons, some calculations to draw a rectangle around that selection. So let's see that. If I go ahead and click this highlight button, you'll see that we're calculating the range. We know where runs are wrapping, and we can curtail or truncate this rectangle line by line simply by doing those calculations and using that new selection API that the rich text box provides. All right. So those are a few of the features of the rich text box control. I could go ahead and jump back to my presentation. I suggest, the PM who owns this feature, Mark Rideout, he's doing a breakout session, CL51. You should stop by and chat with him at that session if you're interested in learning more about text and accessibility. And I'll have some more other demos with the rich text control later in the section. So, since we all work in software, we know even the most basic change low in the stack can have a profound effect on items higher up in the call stack. The parser is one of those features that nobody really thinks about until the performance sucks or until it breaks and it doesn't recognize your well-formed XAML, or you get weird errors when you have bad or poor form, malformed XAML, and you're trying to debug it. We've invested a lot of dev resources for Silverlight 4 to clean up our parser, to do that sharpening the axe, if you will, and bring it more into conformance with the XAML specification. Some examples that I've cited here are direct content support for elements that have a content property. So for example, if you have a button, a lot of people want to be able to just put the text that the button displays into direct content versus having to set the content property using the element property syntax. You can now do that with our new parser. The ignore white space is interesting. Any of you who have sort of hit tabs or new lines into content controls and had those new lines and those non-printable or non-displayable characters show up in your markup, know how frustrating it could be because it's inconsistent with WPF. So we actually fixed our parser to say recognize more correct XAML and better handle incorrect XAML. To do this, we're shipping a side-by-side parser in Silverlight 4. We don't want to break existing apps, so apps that are deployed, we have a 99-1 rule. 99% of existing apps will continue to work. No changes necessary. If it's a Silverlight 3 application, you're using the Silverlight 4 plugin, behaviorally, it should just work. There should be no failures. There are 1%, we're just leaving ourselves an out, that there may be some apps doing some things that we just didn't test for or didn't predict, and for those, we certainly want to hear about them. For taking your existing app and recompiling it on Silverlight 4 and opting into the new parser, we have a 90-10 rule where we say 90% of apps should just port over seamlessly. Should be able to bring it into Visual Studio, recompile it targeting Silverlight 4, and for the most part just work. Scenarios that failed silently before will work, or you would get errors for it. Scenarios that are unsupported and gave you exceptions before will hopefully give you more useful errors to help you track down those failures. I don't know how helpful it is to know that H result E fail was returned by some COM automation object. That's probably not very straightforward. Or more importantly, to find out that your error messages were being reported for elements that were later in the visual tree than the actual element that was in violation. So the summary is we've done some heavy lifting beneath the covers, under the hood, to make our parser more powerful, make it more robust, make it more performant. It sets us up for future innovations, things like markup extensions, custom markup extensions, and more support for scenarios that exist in WPF. One that I'm really excited about with the new parser, because it's very simple. And then you say, well, why did it take you so long to do it? Is the support for the XML NS namespace definition attribute and the XML NS prefix attribute. And so what that is, just visually, it's easier for me to show you than to tell you. How many people use the Silverlight toolkit today? Oh, wow, that's impressive. So in the former life, I was on the Silverlight toolkit team, really excited about all the controls that we shipped. One of the banes of our existence was the lack of the support for these attributes. Because if you really took an inventory and you used every component across the toolkit and the SDK, you would have your XAML littered with about 40 or 41 of these XML NS attributes at the top. Now, for someone who's sort of obsessive compulsive like me, it's an eyesore having all this XAML, unnecessary XAML at the top of my code. But it's also a productivity issue, because now you have to remember which tag, which prefix to use depending on which control you want to target. By supporting these, it essentially allows us to add attributes to our assemblyinfo.cs or .vb files for like control authors or control vendors, similar to the toolkit. And those attributes basically map the DLL, the assembly, to a URI, a schema URI, which can in turn be associated with the prefix. So instead of having 40 of these XML and NS namespace attributes at the top of your XAML, you only need 2, one for the SDK and one for the toolkit. Any control in the SDK, so yeah, fantastic, you're awake. So it's much cleaner code. Yeah, it's not, you still have to remember 1 or 2 switches. Is it SDK colon or is it toolkit colon? But at least you don't have to remember 40. I think that's a big step forward. And again, one of the features that was enabled by the work that we did with the parser. So switching gears for a moment, talking about media. A lot of what Silverlight is today, people know because of its media capabilities. You know, we looked at, the NBC Olympics and CTV and Netflix, and there's just all these amazing companies and amazing experiences that are being built around media. And for Silverlight 4, we wanted to keep that momentum, keep our partners happy, keep those content publishers excited about targeting Silverlight. And to do that, we had to put a lot of emphasis on content and output protection. So content protection is DRM, digital rights management, just a friendlier name, I guess. Output protection is all about protecting that analog whole, where at some point the pixels need to be displayed on a device, right? Whether it's your flat panel or your laptop or your phone. And I'm not going to ask you to show your hands, but I know many of us have seen bootleg movies where someone has just pointed a camcorder or a camera at the screen to record a movie and capture that IP. So while we don't have a complete solution for that scenario, our partners have requested that we add support for some of these sort of more modern, more advanced ways of protecting high definition or high quality audio and digital video as it's being distributed over the internet. And some of the things that I specifically call out here is we support the latest sort of ratified standard for protecting H.264 content in an MP4 container through ClearNow. So we talked in Silverlight 3 about the H.264 content protection, and we also wanted to figure out a way to stay ahead of where the standards body is, because things are constantly moving. The crackers and the people who are stealing content, bootleggers, they are very motivated, and so there's a constant investment in this area to sort of outflank and outmaneuver. And you can expect to have support for the latest, again, ratified standard for protecting H.264 content in Silverlight for RTW. So if that matters to you, fantastic. If it doesn't, fantastic. The other thing that we talked about, very minor, sort of very minor unless you have a scenario that webcam and mic or multiple webcams and mics connected to a device are important, like a security scenario, is the ability to preview which webcam and mic the user, allow your user to preview which webcam or microphone they are selecting for your application. And I'll give you a quick demo of that later on. And then more importantly, in terms of debuggability of applications, again, helping developers track down the root cause of issues. It's not very helpful just to get a very generic media failed event. So we invested the time to create more unique failure codes and more helpful error messages in our media source stream errors. So here's again another picture, gratuitous use of my son. He enjoys watching his content, his videos and everything. He doesn't really care whether it's DRM protected or not. That's an issue for me to figure out. So all I can say is if doing the work to enable content publishers to get content to my son gets us more content, then fantastic. We're going to keep doing that because it goes both ways. Users don't want us to expose data, their intellectual property, if you will, to vendors in the cloud, like their credit cards and the location of sensitive files on their machines. So by doing those protections for our users, as well as for the partners building on top of our stack, we basically enabling scenarios and allowing you to decide whether you're willing to deal with those hurdles, if you will, or those speed bumps. I want to talk quickly about the input changes that we've made. So we showed mouse wheel before. Pin full screen, Scott mentioned in the keynote, so I don't need to spend a lot of time there. I'll show you how to enable it. I don't think he showed the code for it, so it's really easy, really straightforward to do pin full screen mode now. HTML hosting accessibility. So screen readers, again, are very important for users with disabilities. You need a way to have screen readers actually attached to the HTML control and read the content that's being displayed. If it's an ad, then I'm sure the ad publisher wants to know that all their users, all their customers can view those ads. And I talked about the support for input of different text, in addition to scripting, bidirectional, and shaping languages like Arabic and Hebrew in the beta, and the addition of Thai and Vietnamese in the RC. One of the big things that we got in is kind of just in time, a hot development item was the support for index scripts, the Brahmic languages. And we have 9 of, I think it's about 31 support. We support 9 of the 31 index scripts. And I want to call out that this is for input and render only, so the product isn't localized to any Indic languages at this stage. It is localized to Arabic, Hebrew, Thai, and Vietnamese, so the dialogue will have resource strings in those languages. But for Indic languages, you'll be able to type in those languages, but the error messages, the captions and things of that nature will still fall back to English. But we were excited about this because it's been one of the big requested features in quite a while. All right, so let's figure this out. So there's a joke here. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing a chat roulette demo in this kind of audience because it probably cost me my job. I think my boss is somewhere in the audience. But more importantly, just to sort of cut to the chase, we don't have the codec support built into the product or the back-end server components for streaming video content from the webcam on the client back to the server. So doing a full chat application is not supported for SL4. Well, out of the box. You can certainly write your own code to do a managed codec and then stream that content back to the server if you so choose. But it's not as turnkey as one would like. It's high on our to-do list though. But it didn't make the bar for Silverlight 4. What I do want to show you is somewhat gratuitous demo. I think it's kind of cool, where instead of chatting with others, I can sort of do some cool things with me on the video. So that's why it's chat mirror. Oh. Let's grab this. Okay, so here we are in our app. I need a reason to, actually, let me just run the application quickly. And F11. So basically, it's a pretty straightforward application for looking at yourself on the webcam. And if this works, there I am. It works. Good deal. All right. So ignore that for now. I do want to show you the preview that I spent a moment talking about. So I have 2 cameras connected to my laptop up here. One's pointed at you, and one's pointed at me. So again, you can see why it's important to be able to see the preview of the microphone. Didn't work. Second. Oh, it's running in the background. Yeah, so the buffer is already here. So we'll have to continue our demo. This demo is actually interesting. Dan Penn, a member of our team, I thought it would be cool to use pixel shaders to do some interesting things with videos, processing the live stream from the webcam. And right now, you may notice the border of this application is tied to the amount of movement in the video. So if I wave, there it goes. So it's going. You can also see the percent, the motion rate percent down in the lower corner. Some of the other things that pixel shaders allow us to do, since we get access to the underlying pixels, is do edge detection. So again, you can imagine a facial recognition software or security software that processes a set of webcams, a bank of webcams connected to a PC. And the rest of it is, like I said, gratuitous. Now overlaying the edge detection to the live stream and doing a difference. Ooh, that's kind of cool. It's like kind of a matrix. And then the overlay of the difference. So what I want to do is, actually, get out of this, quickly show how easy it is to enable pinned full screen. So this is an example where Alt-tabbing, you might want to keep this look. If you're a security company, you may want to keep your panel of CCTV cameras or what have you displayed on your monitor while you're surfing the web or while you're checking your mail or otherwise failing on your job. This is one opportunity I have to jump into Expression Blend, one of the few opportunities. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to add a button to my bank of buttons over here on the right to pop into pinned full screen mode. So I'm just going to copy this difference button and use that as the basis for my full screen button. Let's say full screen mode. Oh, type. Okay. And we will rename this to screen. Okay. All right. And as long as I'm here in Blend, may as well do something else gratuitous, like add an effect. Show how easy that is. Well, how much easier it would be if I had a bigger resolution. So I'm just going to add a drop shadow to the button, make it stand out a little bit. All right. Gratuitous. So we'll reload, and you see that the changes were popped over to Visual Studio. And our effect is applied. We have our button, and it's currently hooked to the same event handler as the one that I copied. So I'm just going to create a new one. And say generate the event handler, and we go navigate to that event handler. Okay, so here we are. So typically, you would do application.current host for 1 second, wrong place. Content is full screen. And you do true. And hopefully that'll run. I have IE open. Let me close that just in case. So go ahead and do full screen mode. You see our button works. We're in full screen mode, but the second I Alt-tab, it pops out. So it's not pinned. So what do you need to do to make this pinned? Oh, there's one other thing I want to show you is regardless of whether it's pinned or not, any user decision, any action that we need to prompt the user for will still pop you out of full screen mode. So for example, if I start the webcam again, it needs to prompt me because I didn't check the box to say remember my answer. So that exits full screen mode again just to let the user know that they need to pay attention and really be aware of what they're choosing. So to enable full screen mode to stay pinned, we have a full screen options, and that's going to be stays full screen when unfocused instead of the default. Pretty easy. So run it again. Full screen mode, we get prompted. And I exit that kind of fast. Let me show you what that dialogue is. It's saying that, oh, let me close it. Since it already persisted for that session, is asking me, am I okay with this application remaining full screen even as I navigate to other windows? So again, we don't want people to think they're running like a screensaver or something that does a very good job of mimicking the Windows desktop and having them start typing their sensitive information into that window. So we prompt the user, they say yes. Now we can Alt-tab, and you see we stay full screen. You can clap. It's pretty easy stuff. Oh, or not. All right. All right, so that was an interesting demo. Let's move on. So on the networking side, we had support for doing upload progress. So if you're like Facebook and their new image uploader that allows you to select multiple files, and you want to tell the user when that operation is going to complete, this upload progress allows you to tap into the client networking stack and offer that. Caching support on the client is very important because in the browser, when we're using the browser HTTP, the HTTP web request, you actually get the benefit of the caching provided by IE, Firefox, Safari, or Chrome. And out of the browser, you typically want to have things cached as well for the same performance benefits. So we added support for caching in Silverlight for RC. The sockets policy file can now be retrieved over HTTP, which is important for people who want to know what services are exposed and do that behind a firewall. And the accept language header is inserted by default. Again, if you're on a typical web page, this is bringing parity to the normal HTML experience where your machine may be, the user may be configured for Thai, and they want the Thai version of your application, the localized version of your application, and the accept language header is the standard way of offering that support. Out of browser, there's an entire session dedicated to out of browser and trusted applications. Ashish is actually doing that session. And I don't want to steal his thunder and dive too deeply into this content because he's going to do a fantastic job doing so. There's one thing that I do want to use my time to clear up, and one of our sort of influential members of the Silverlight community did an excellent blog post on all the various things that you could do with COM automation or COM via automation in Silverlight 4. Some of it set off a firestorm of, wow, Microsoft is exposing users. Is this really the right thing to do? And I want to really clear the air and clear up some of the misconceptions. So let me switch over to that app. So I essentially downloaded that person's code and did a bulk search and replace because we renamed COM Automation Factory to Automation Factory as a way to indicate our ambitions to make the automation support in Silverlight less Windows-centric, less Windows-dependent in the future. We heard you loud and clear. You don't want features that only exist in one platform and aren't available in the other. So our goals are to investigate AppleScript in a future version for Silverlight 4, doing the rename, starting to think through the scenarios on how we can enable automation support on other platforms, namely on OS X, is certainly high in our queue. So I did the search and replace to make the code compile on the RC. And I'll just, again, run the app. And this is where we have a quiz. So you look at this application, and you say, okay, I'm running out of the browser, elevated application. This is an elevated trust application. And if you read some of these captions, you say, wow, those are some pretty scary things for an app to be able to do to my local machine, especially if I'm not an admin on the box. Well, if you go and you review the blog post, it would indicate that all these things are enabled. And I just want to point out the ones that are not, and why that's the case. So installing an out-of-browser application certainly is enabled. I mean, you can right-click on the Silverlight application that allows itself to be installed out of the browser and do that. That's a user action that we expect a non-admin user to be able to do. We will prompt them, so on and so forth. So that is. But what about writing a file to the root of the system drive? How many people think that's supported? How many people think that's safe? Oh, none of you. It's not safe. In fact, if you go over to your drive, right? Just say here, I'm running Windows 7. This is true on Vista as well. And you try to, say, create a new document. It doesn't even show up in the options. Right? If I try to drag a document over, I'm going to have to elevate because that's an operation that could affect other users on the machine. And as a result, Windows forces the user to elevate in order to add content. Jeez, everything is popping up here. Add content to. I think I need to exit there to the location. So here's the prompt, and it says, oh, no, that's not what it's prompting. Let me find another prompt. Here's a prompt. So it tells me I need to have admin permission to drag something to the root of the system drive. So if I click that button in this application, and wherever it went, there it goes, we should fail, because we don't allow you to do things as a normal user that require elevation, even if you're running in elevated privileges. So click write text, and it fell silently. Now, how can we get a more obvious response to what's going on here? Let's go ahead and write a quick line of code in the unhandled exception. And that's to just show a message box of E dot. Just about to show. Oh, thank you. So what I want to do is get the inner exception just so we can see what happens if you do attempt to access or do an operation that otherwise would be prevented by the operating system. So we go ahead and run it again. And do write to file, and you see we get a security exception. So that operation isn't allowed. Why did that work before on the blog? Why was it indicated as something that was possible, was supported? It's because they were running inside the debugger. I'm running Control F5, which just runs it normally. If you do F5, an elevated app, because of how the debugger works and how deep it needs to connect to the process, then the operating system doesn't. I mean, saying if you're debugging your process, you can do so much damage to the machine. The same security token checks aren't in place. So be careful when you're doing elevated trust debugging on your system, and make sure that you test the app inside and outside the debugger, because the security semantics are very different. We do the protection when you're running normal, like if I just launch this application off my desktop, I'm running it as a normal process. I wouldn't be able to write a file to the C drive. I wouldn't be able to read a file from the system drive, so that wouldn't work. These other operations are pretty safe. You can do them from Windows script. Even things like reading from the registry, from the machine hive, is supported. As a normal user, you can actually go ahead and run Windows script and access the HKey local machine hive in your registry. So that's not something that we block. And the file system watchers, those actually are supported as well, because again, from Windows scripting host, you are allowed to watch files, you're just not allowed to save or read them from the root drive. So I wanted to clear the air in case you read that post and you say, well, look at all the great things I can do with the automation support in Silverlight 4. Then you deploy your application, you see that it's failing with these bizarre security exceptions, and that's because you have to be careful how you're executing an application. Normally, protected execution is still protected within Silverlight. We go to great lengths to apply the same user credentials to the process that the user would have outside of Silverlight. Okay. Space. So Scott Morrison has a whole session on building business applications that called out two big features in the RC in terms of iNotify data error info, allowing you to do asynchronous data reporting. Karen talked about iData error info in her talk. So you think of this as the async support for data grid that was missing and requested. XPath support, something we've heard for many, many releases. You're processing XML documents when it's the one tool in your toolbox. When you know you need it, there's no substitute. And we actually added XPath support through system.xml.xpath.dll to the SDK. So that's available to you now in Silverlight. In graphics and printing, we actually promoted perspective transforms to the other image manipulation transforms, rotate, skew, resize. And so now you get hardware acceleration for perspective transforms as well. That's a big feature for many people. We saw apps today that are doing some great things with hardware acceleration that otherwise wouldn't be possible running in software only and not tapping into the GPU. The memory usage and perf improvements are, again, one of those places where it's not obvious what the new scenarios are, but when the performance tanks, everyone becomes aware of it. It becomes very obvious when you go to use the application that something is awry. So we've been tuning our graphics engine for this entire release to do better working set, better startup time, to enable cache composition on more elements and then more scenarios. And then the printing support is, again, one of the areas that I'll have Scott touch on in detail, but I did want to go back to our rich notepad demo and show you some of these things. Okay. So Scott talked about the support for printing And he mentioned it as one of the key features, one of the most requested features for Silverlight 4, especially for line of business. And I want to just quickly show you how easy it is to print that rich text box and the content that it's displaying. So first, you new up this new thing called a print document, right? And then you need to tell it that you want to print the page. I'll just do an anonymous type here. E is already used, so let's say O and args. Okay. And very simply, you say args dot page visual equals, I just remember that the element name for that rich text box is RTA, rich text box. And for the purposes of this demo, we're going to say we're finished printing. We don't have any more pages. And the other thing you might want to do is let the user know that their page printed successfully. So we can say in print and do a similar anonymous method. Just let VS clear up these formatting issues for me. And for that, we just show a message box. Show printing. Okay. Then finally, we have to actually kick off the print by calling the print method. And we can give it a name if we want. Say Silverlight. Okay. And let's go ahead and run it. Now I'll click this button, and I'll just print it to a PDF file. Get my message box, and because of the way my print processor works, there it goes. It popped up behind, and there's the document on my desktop, and there's the content. But we can do better. You see the content isn't flowing. It's being truncated on the edges. There are no margins. So, let's look at some of the more advanced printing scenarios really quickly. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this in the interest of time and add print with preview. Hope I got that in the right place. So just to show you how powerful this is, let me Control-K, Control-D to reformat my document. Here we have a print preview dialog, which is basically a way to show the user in something that we just created. Show the user what how the content they're printing is going to appear on their printer before they waste the paper or waste the time. One of the things that we wanted to do was basically make sure that the text is flowing and is not just falling off the margins. So we walked through the content of the original rich text area and built up the rich text box and built up this new rich text box, which has a fixed width and support for text wrapping. So this is a way for you see we're essentially building up another element tree and using that as our root visual that we send to the printer. So all the rest of this code here is identical to what I wrote before. The only difference is that we're printing which text area 2 as our preview. And if we run this, click print. You see we have a preview with the flowing and no truncation. I can go ahead and print it again as before. And, well, it's telling me it printed successfully, but again, I have to wait for, there we go. Silverlight 4. Oh, man. Here we go. So it's wrapped. There's no truncation. We're able to actually have a much better experience by using some of the built-in support. So pretty cool, pretty straightforward. So wait, there's more. We're almost at the end, a few minutes ago. We have support for 32 new languages. I mentioned Arabic and Hebrew and Thai and Vietnamese and Indic, but there are many, many others in the runtime. They get level 2 support, which means that the UI is localized in those languages. This is very important for Silverlight as we have aspirations to continue our global adoption. So hopefully your language, your native language is one of those. We we are supporting basically the same set of languages that are supported by Windows Live. So it's a pretty extensive set. Support for private mode browsing, incognito window on Chrome, in private mode on IE, private tab in Firefox. Essentially, for users to say, don't leave any footprints of my session on the machine after I close the tab or close that instance of the browser. And this is important for Silverlight to participate in that transaction, because we do store things to isolated storage. We allow developers to write to isolated storage. We write things like at the app settings, whether the window, if the application is installed out of the browser, where its startup location is, and things of that nature. And so we need to clean that content up or either prevent you from writing to it. So if you haven't been writing your code such that you've been checking whether isolated storage is even available, you should be writing your code in that way before writing to it. That was always the case because the user has the ability, go over here, to turn it off. Right? I can always disable application storage, and your app will just go up in flames. So now with this feature, where we actually participate in private mode, we prevent you from writing to isolated storage if the user is running your application in that mode. So this is more of a reason to wrap that code in a try-catch block and handle that exception. And I can show you the code, but I'm sure you know how to handle exceptions, so I won't worry about that. Other things that we've done, Google Chrome is officially supported. We talked about that at the beta. We've been testing it, taking it through its paces. We are very happy with the level of compatibility coverage that we've done. So it is a first-class browser with the RC. So if your customers are Chrome users, then they will be happy on Windows. Isolated storage perf improvements. We heard from a lot of people who are trying to write a lot of content. We give you 25 megs if you take an app out of browser. And for like offline media content, watching videos or things of that nature, the write execution to isolated storage was painfully slow in some cases. So the CLR team really took that feedback to heart, and basically by changing the bookkeeping data or how they process the bookkeeping data to know, how much of the quota is the user's apps using, and do we need to enforce, writing for future writes to the isolated storage because of they've exceeded that quota, then that was actually slowing down the write performance of isolated storage. So what we see is a significant improvement in Windows because of simply how we do better, sort of more efficient bookkeeping, and it also applies to the Mac. So you should experience faster write improvements to isolated storage, and read improvements have been pretty satisfactory. So with Silverlight 4, hopefully those go away. The hardware accelerated deep zoom image. So Vertigo, again, a key partner, they've been doing a lot of great things with Silverlight. Everyone's probably familiar, seen the Hard Rock Cafe app many times. I wanted to show you a quick peek at the version of the Hard Rock Cafe app or Hard Rock Memorabilia app that uses our hardware accelerated C-Dragon or deep zoom technology. So make sure I'm looking at the right one. This is the live one. So you see I'm going off the live site here. Hopefully the connection will stay up. If I filter, you see there's sort of a sluggish delay because this is all being done in software C-Dragon. If I switch tabs to this demo site that's been enabled for the hardware, then it's actually, well, I don't know if you can tell, but it actually is faster. Okay, maybe that wasn't a good demo, sorry. It is faster though, maybe it's trust me. Note to self. Okay. So, the other things that sort of called out in the SDK, numeric support, we added the system numerics assembly to the SDK, so if you're doing math computations where you need those types, then they're available to you. I already mentioned XPath being the SDK. MEF is shipping their dynamic zap support in the SDK. Previously it was in the toolkit. We actually got it into the SDK. And then for refreshing the page, again, for typical browser scenarios, we want to bring as much of those to out-of-browser scenarios as possible. And if you're using page and navigation and frame, then you want a way to refresh your content similar to user pressing F5 in the browser. And so we added that to the frame and navigation controls in the SDK. won't show you, actually I already showed you those because I'm running out of time. Here's the eye chart for the Silverlight 4 RC, similar to the one I showed you for the beta. So again, in 4 months' time, we covered a lot of area, and the pace has just been phenomenal. We continue to invest in the platform, continue to listen to your feedback, so keep it coming. We're really excited about this release and hope you're excited about it as well. Further information, as you're planning out your itinerary for the next couple days, here are some sessions that I recommend. Certainly, there are a lot of sessions on the Windows Phone, and rightfully so. It's an amazing device, amazing set of technology. But in terms of tools, deeper dives in app model, understanding how to build business applications, more things about accessibility, unit testing on Silverlight. There's a lot of content here for SL4. I know we had to stay at a pretty high level for this session. I encourage you to go to these talks to learn even more. And lastly, at the bottom, sort of quick public service announcement. Anyone who's interested in learning more or talking to the developers behind the designer support, the interactive designer support, and I sort of glossed over it, but you saw we could do things interactively on Visual Studio Surface as we can in Blend. Please go by the comments area right after this session, today or tomorrow, and talk with the Cider team. They're eager to hear from you, eager to hear any feedback you have about Visual Studio 2010. My call to action, so one thing or a few things I want to ask you to do, please submit your evaluation form. You're probably sitting on it, and we accept wrinkled ones as well. Download the RC, so you go to silverlight.net/get started and start playing with the bits. Give us your feedback. We are quickly approaching the release date. The engineering team is heads down doing those last bug fixes. But if you find something that's a showstopper, we will stop it and make sure we fix your app if it's broken or enable a scenario that you feel is key. Questions and feedback can be directed to me, keith.smith@microsoft.com, or to the forums that you all should know. And then our UX team has been doing a lot of field research and looking for volunteers to help shape the future of Silverlight. If you're interested in participating in that research and having your voice added, please send mail to this email address, devur@microsoft.com. Lastly, enjoy the conference, meet some new people, and exchange some business cards. Thanks a lot. Questions?